line that I thought, well, maybe this. And I don't know if you had a chance to read it or not, but it was talking about exactly the need to change our education to fit the needs of people today, especially if you're thinking in terms of farmers and things of that sort, and people moving into cities to learn how to work in factories and things of that sort. So that was the focus of that article, as well as the idea of how a democracy needs educated people in order for the democracy to flourish. And that's something that we don't argue about anymore. We certainly know it's true. Democracy and Education, that was considered one of his best books, and that's much later. Reconstruction and Philosophy, Human Nature and Conduct. The Quest for Certainty, that's focused on this truth issue and certitude. How can we be certain about something when at the same time what we have learned is that experience will show us that what we're certain about might very well change in the future, and so on. All right, in these notes I have an exploration of the theory of inquiry. What is inquiry? It's the controlled or directed transformation of an indeterminate situation into one that is so determinate in its constituent distinctions and relations as to convert the elements of the original situation into a unified whole. It's also an example of how verbose he was. I'm not sure that people thought of him as an absolutely great writer because of that, but there you go. Okay. Other people that he knew and that are interesting. Jane Addams and Hull House. Are you familiar with this at all? While he was at the University of Chicago, he became aware of a woman, a wealthy woman, who was concerned about the state of the poor in Chicago. And what she did was created this house, the Hull House, which was open for poor people to come in, to have meals, to I think take showers and things of that sort, necessary services and so on. So it wasn't a place where they would live, but it was a place for them to come in and get help. But she also made sure that the building was structured with lots of art. I guess we could, I don't know what it looks like now, but I imagine it's different than it was back in the 1890s and so on. But John Dewey was her friend and came and visited there and was very impressed and influenced by her. By the way, she eventually was awarded let's just go to Jane, because I want Jane Addams. So, settlement activist, reformer, sociologist, public administrator, philosopher, and author. And she did win a presidential award, I don't remember when she was much older. But she's definitely someone we should be aware of. And the feminist movement she was involved with as well. So look her up when you get a chance. let's talk about Bertrand Russell then. Unless you have questions about John Dewey, I've ran out of things that I thought were pertinent. Imagine as long a life as he led, why on earth am I not thinking of other stuff that's important?
Because I know in the case of Dewey, he makes a lot of like academic contributions though. Did he have wasn't it a Dewey decimal system?
No, that's a different Dewey.
Yeah, different Dewey. I know in the case of Dewey, he was told by a friend who looked into, oddly enough, Dewey before. He had come up with like a, I forgot what it was called. It's basically like the way that I guess after class, look into that and talk about it too.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know any specific connection with libraries. There were, if you saw School and Society, the article, there were different designs that he suggested that schools, depending on the age that they were aimed at, what kind of classrooms, laboratories, space to do things, and where the library should be. So he did design those. I'm pretty sure I actually did this. Okay. So here's the School and Society text. And if you look at, well, these are drawings by students trying to get, age appropriate art and so on. But so these are charts that I found very confusing, but what he's trying to show is the change in the type of education worldwide. If you go back to the medieval school systems and so on, but you're looking at the 19th century now, you're looking at utility, technical schools, the way things should change for us. But in these charts, I don't know if you could figure them out. I couldn't. But the school has to interact with business, with home, with research, and developing professional school teachers. And you should have a garden or park or county, country, or I don't know. I don't understand exactly what he's trying to do with that. Same thing with this chart, suggesting how the library, notice, is in the center. But look at what he's got going on around this. A kitchen, dining room. Did anybody read this and figure out what the heck he was trying to talk about there? Here's museum now is in the center of this chart 4. This is for a university. A university instead. So where the library is, what's in the library, what's accessible. Clearly these are issues that he talked about. I'm definitely not a Dewey specialist at all, but my quiz question, I suppose you noticed, was what impact did Dewey have on education? The Gutenberg project on democracy and education is another one to look at if you're interested. I suppose what I'm thinking, he had an impact on education not just in the United States but worldwide, because other countries clearly were influenced by his ideas. By the way, when we're talking about Wittgenstein, one of the neat things about Wittgenstein was he was a rich, his father was the wealthiest man in Europe, and he was raised to become a member of the companies, and an engineer specifically. That was the goal of his father and his education. He had lots of kids, but Wittgenstein's was probably autistic. We've seen that before. But he was, by the way, in a class with Adolf Hitler, which is kind of fun. If we go and look at suppose we can find it pretty easily. So, which one is Wittgenstein and which one is Hitler? Can you tell? This one definitely looks like he's in a Sieg Heil mood, doesn't he? It's just my thought. This one looks more like Wittgenstein, I suppose. They were at a school in Linz together. It's kind of interesting. But the first academic period of his life in Europe, outside of Vienna, was when he went to study flight in England, in Manchester. And while he was there, he was learning how the balloons worked. That's the point at which flight had worked. He eventually would design an engine for a plane that was a jet engine. The trouble was all the planes were still made out of paper. And if you put a jet engine on a paper plane, it doesn't work. I don't know if you can imagine. Pretty hilarious in my mind how that would work. But at one point he read Bertrand Russell's Principia, and he went to Bertrand Russell because he wanted to become a philosopher. He brought his work and he handed it to Bertrand Russell. By the way, Bertrand Russell is an earl and a professor, and this young German boy basically comes up to this gentleman, hands him his writings and says, "Read this, and if you think it's good, I'll become a philosopher. If it isn't, I'll be a pilot." And Russell actually read it and got in touch with him and said, "Don't be a pilot." I thought, that's pretty significant. Don't be a pilot. He didn't say be a philosopher, but don't be a pilot. He's probably thinking this guy would make a terrible pilot. But in any case, at that point, Wittgenstein started studying what Russell was doing. So what's Russell doing at the time? Bertrand Russell is doing the Principia, or he's done the Principia Mathematica. By the way, I find it very confusing. You have to remember that Sir Isaac Newton wrote the Principia, and it's just always called the Principia, which means principles. Russell's book is the Principia Mathematica, Principles of Mathematics. But it's not actually about mathematics, it's about language. And the concern they have is that language is confusing. It's hard to know for sure what a person means when they say something. And so we ought to create a language that's more clear, and that would be a mathematical language. But in this mathematical language, he attempts to, besides creating the language, and Alfred North Whitehead is the co-author with him, by the way. This is Bertrand Russell. And what happens is you who he is. Notice he lived till he was, shoot, where do they say?